Podcasts are becoming an increasingly popular medium for marketers and businesses to reach their target audience. With the rise of podcasting, it is important to understand how to optimize your podcast for search engines in order to increase visibility and reach more listeners. In this guide, we will cover the essential elements of podcast SEO and provide actionable tips to help you improve your rankings in search engines like Google. Keyword research. The first step in optimizing your podcast for search engines is to conduct keyword research. This will help you understand what terms and phrases your target audience is searching for and how you can target those keywords in your podcast. There are a number of tools available for keyword research, including Google Keyword Planner, SEMrush, and Ahrefs. Start by identifying a list of relevant keywords that are relevant to your podcast and its topic. Once you have a list of keywords, you can use them to optimize your podcast title, description, and episode titles. Optimizing your podcast title and description. The title and description of your podcast are critical elements in determining your podcast search rankings. Your title and description should accurately reflect the content of your podcast and include the keywords you identified in your keyword research. When crafting your podcast title, make sure it is compelling and includes your primary keyword. Your description should provide a clear and concise overview of your podcast's content and should include your primary keyword as well as any other relevant keywords. Optimizing your episode titles. In addition to optimizing your podcast title and description, it is important to also optimize your episode titles. Episode titles should accurately reflect the content of the episode and include relevant keywords. When creating episode titles, consider using a format that includes the episode number, episode title, and primary keyword. This will make it clear to search engines what the episode is about and help it rank for relevant keywords. Submitting your podcast to podcast directories. Submitting your podcast to popular podcast directories like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts can help increase visibility and drive more listeners to your podcast. When submitting your podcast to directories, make sure to include accurate and detailed information about your podcast, including its title, description, and episode titles. This will make it easier for search engines to understand the content of your podcast and help it rank for relevant keywords. Creating a podcast website. Having a dedicated website for your podcast can also help improve its search rankings. Your podcast website should include detailed information about your podcast, including its title, description, and episode titles. Additionally, it should include a link to your podcast's RSS feed, which will allow search engines to easily crawl and index your podcast's content. To further optimize your podcast website for search engines, consider including a blog section where you can post transcriptions of your episodes, as well as additional content related to your podcast topic. Conclusion: podcast SEO is an essential aspect of reaching more listeners and growing your podcast's audience. By conducting keyword research, optimizing your podcast title, description, and episode titles, submitting your podcast to directories, and creating a dedicated website, you can improve your podcast search rankings and reach more listeners. By following the guidelines in this guide and utilizing the tips provided, you can improve your podcast search visibility and reach more listeners. Additionally, by creating a podcast website and including a blog section, you can provide additional value to your listeners and increase the chances of your podcast appearing in search results. One important thing to remember is to keep your podcast content fresh and up to date. Regularly publishing new episodes and updating your website with fresh content can help keep your podcast relevant and improve its search rankings. Another important aspect to consider is building backlinks to your podcast's website. Backlinks are links from other websites that point to your podcast's website. The more high-quality backlinks you have pointing to your website, the higher your website will rank in search engines. Building backlinks can be done by guest blogging, submitting your podcast to podcast directories, and reaching out to other websites to ask for a link back to your podcast website. In conclusion, podcast SEO is a crucial aspect of reaching more listeners and growing your podcast audience. By following the guidelines in this guide and utilizing the tips provided, you can improve your podcast search visibility and reach more listeners. Remember to keep your content fresh, regularly publish new episodes, and build backlinks to your podcast's website.